The Role of Hadith in Ikhtilāf among Muslim Jurists. Mcgill University, 1983. Preponderance, Tarjih. As is usual with definitions, there are different expressions defining Tarjih, preponderance, depending upon how preponderance is perceived. Those who maintain that preponderance is an act of a mujtahid define it as the strengthening of one of the evidences in order to know the stronger evidence, and hence act according to it and cancel the other. This is the expression used by the Shafi'is. Those, however, who maintain that tarjih is an actual property present in the evidence itself define it in a different way. Their expression is that the preponderance is the superiority of the two equals over the other. This is the expression of the Hanafis. When there is ta'arud, conflict between two ahadith, it is often resolved by resorting to jam', which is harmonization. But if harmonization was not possible, then we resort to preponderance. There are many procedures that could be used when using preponderance. Al-Azami mentions 50 procedures in his book Al-I'tibar. Al-Iraqi, in his commentary on Ibn Salah's book, lists more than 100 procedures for tarjih. Some scholars, on the other hand, prefer to categorize these numerous procedures into major divisions, with each category having several of these procedures under one heading. Ghazali divides them into three categories. A. Preponderance with respect to the chains of transmission. B. Preponderance with respect to the text of the hadith. C. Preponderance with respect to other external factors, not being specifically matan or isnad. Al-Ahmadi mentions four major divisions, the above three, and preponderance with respect to the textual meanings of the hadith. However, there is covered under the second category of Ghazali's division, the matan. As-Suyuti divides them into seven categories. Al-Ghazali's division seems to be more logical. It is well summarized and encloses all procedures. Our discussion will be confined to these three main procedures. 1. Preponderance with respect to the chains of transmission of the hadith. Tarjih by the multitude of transmitters, kathrat al-ruwat. The Jumhur accepts this as a marajih, something that's preponderant. But Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf do not accept this, unless the transmitters reach the number necessary for a hadith to become mashhur, well known. Riwayat al-Faqih. The narrations of a jurist. Most scholars hold the view that a jurist narration of a hadith is preponderant over a non-jurist narration, but some scholars believe that if the narrator keeps firmly to the actual text of the hadith and does not alter its wording, then both narrations, the faqih and the non-faqih, must be considered equal in value. The majority of scholars, however, hold that fiqh al-rawi is in itself a strong preponderance, regardless of the above matter. Tarjih riwayat al-musnad al-mursal. The preponderance of a musnad hadith over a mursal hadith. This is the opinion of the majority. Al-Jurjani and Isa bin Aban do not agree with them. Preponderance with respect to the text of the hadith. This includes tarjih al-Khass al-am, the preponderance of the particular over the general. Shawkani, however, maintains that this is not tarjih but jam', harmonization. The reason being that both Khass and am al-hadith are totally valid, while tarjih takes place when one of the hadith is left out. Tarjih al-muthbit al-nafi, the preponderance of the affirmative over the negative. The philosophy of this lies in the fact that the affirmative has an additional information not present in the negative. Al-Khudari does not agree with this. His view is that there is no valid reason to prefer one hadith over the other, just because one is muthbit and the other is nafi. This is also the opinion of Al-Ghazali, who says in this case an external factor must be sought. Tarjih al-muharrim al-mubih, the preponderance of the prohibitive over the permissive. This is the opinion of the Jumhur. Their reasoning is that if prohibitive things must be treated carefully and cautiously, some usulis, however, believe that the permissive should be preponderated over the prohibitive. Isa bin Aban and Ghazali maintain that there are both equal and none of them is preponderant over the other. Tarjih is sought in an external factor. Preponderance with respect to an external factor. This includes tarjih by the multitude of evidences, that is, the greater the number of the hadith in a particular matter, the stronger it will be with respect to its competitor. This is the opinion of the Jumhur. Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf hold negative views on this subject. Tarjih by the practice of the people of Medina. This is a view held by Imam Malik and Shafi'i. Abu Hanifa does not agree with this. He says that there is no consideration whatsoever for the dwellings and countries of a certain people. What should be considered there are sunnah, and what should be considered there sunnah is the sunnah of the Prophet. The effects of ta'arud and tarjih on the disagreement of the fuqaha. It should be clear by now that there are many different views among scholars with respect to ta'arud and tarjih, conflict and preponderance. These disagreements lead to differences in some Shari'iyya rules. An examination of some of these differences will be helpful in this stage of our discussion. There are, for example, conflicting ahadith with regard to the punishment of the apostate woman. On the one hand, we have Bukhari's report that says, "Whoever changes his religion, then kill him." This hadith sentences anyone who changes his religion, that is, apostates from Islam, to death. The text of the hadith does not distinguish between males and females. This is the opinion of the Jumhur. On the other hand, we have the hadith reported by both Bukhari and Muslim stating that the Prophet prohibited killing women. The Hanafis maintain that according to this hadith, an apostate woman must not be killed. Her penalty, according to them, is only imprisonment. The Jumhur, in response to this argument, say that the latter hadith, which prohibits the killing of women, is only aimed at protecting women during battles and warfare. It has nothing to do with apostasy. Hence, there is no conflict between the two hadith. This view is supported by the fact that the Prophet himself gave Marwan, when she apostated, the freedom of choosing one of two things, either to repent or to be killed. There are also many conflicting reports in the collections of hadith concerning the recitation of the Quran when praying behind the Imam. Bukhari and Muslim report that the Prophet says, "Whoever does not recite the mother of the book," meaning the first chapter, the Fatiha, his prayer is invalid. Thus Shafi'i, supported by this hadith, maintains that reciting al-Fatiha behind the Imam is obligatory wajib, whether the Imam recites it loudly or secretly by his heart. But Abu Hanifa disagrees with this view. He supports his claim with the hadith stating that the Prophet prohibited the individual's recitation of Quran when praying a congregation. He says, "Whoever prays behind an Imam, the reciting of the Quran by the Imam is sufficient for him." Hence Abu Hanifa, contrary to Shafi'i, maintains that members of the congregational prayer are to remain silent and should not recite anything, whether the Imam recites loudly or silently. An-Nawawi, in his famous work Al-Majmu', in an effort to solve this problem, claims that hadith which states that the ma'mum, the followers, should not recite are weak and not sound. This view, however, is hard to accept, since some of these hadith are mentioned in Sahih Muslim, the second most authentic book for hadith before Muslims. Malik, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Ishaq resort to jam' in this conflicting case. They maintain that the hadith mentioning recitation are only intended for the prayers which the Imam does not recite loudly, and the hadith which prohibit recitation of the ma'mum are only intended for prayers in which the Imam recites loudly. In this case, the ma'mum has to listen only. His listening will compensate the recitation. In this way, jam' will be totally acceptable and both hadith remain valid. Another example is ihram, ritual consecration. Bukhari and Muslim have quoted a report from Ibn Abbas that the Prophet married Maymuna while he was in ihram. Ibn Abbas therefore opined that contracting nikah in the state of ihram is permissible. Abu Hanifa and Thawri followed this opinion. Muslim has reported another hadith that a muhrim must not contract himself or somebody else in marriage, nor propose it. Tirmidhi has narrated a hadith through Abu Rafi', who reports that the Prophet married and cohabited with Maymuna while he, the Prophet, was halal, that is, out of ihram. He, Abu Rafi', further says that he acted as the messenger between the two. Muslim quotes yet another hadith from Maymuna herself, who says that the Prophet married her while he was not muhrim. Relying on these hadith, many companions such as Umar and Zayd ibn Thabit uphold a marriage is prohibited during ihram. Malik, Shafi'i and Ahmed also support this opinion. Here we see a contradiction between these hadith. So Abu Hanifa prefers the hadith narrated on the authority of Ibn Abbas, who is a great jurist, and that the report of the jurist according to him always carries more weight. However, the majority of the jurists have based their opinion on the fact that many hadith have been reported against the opinion upheld by Abu Hanifa. The majority therefore give more credence to the number of hadith involved. They also argue that the judgment is based upon the narration of the person directly involved in the affair, such as Abu Rafi', the go-between, and Maymuna, the bride. As for the hadith reported by Ibn Abbas, they opine that he was quite young at the time the marriage took place, so there is a likelihood of misunderstanding and misjudgment on his part. Sa'id ibn Musayyib also expressed the same opinion while discussing the said hadith. And Nawawi, talking about the same hadith, says that the word muhrim, quoted in the hadith of Ibn Abbas, could imply that the Prophet was within the boundaries of the haram and not in the state of ihram. This seems to be a far-fetched interpretation. Here we see that the basic factor involved in the disagreement between Abu Hanifa and the majority is hadith. Our last example concerns the zakah of crops and fruits. Bukhari and Muslim report a hadith that had been narrated from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri that the Prophet says there is no zakah on goods which are less than 5 usuq, which is 450 pounds. This implies that zakat would not be incumbent on crops and fruit that are less than 5 awsaq in weight. The majority of the jurists hold, the companions and others such as Ibn Umar, Jabir, Malik and Shafi'i, Abu Yusuf and Al-Shaybani all uphold this opinion. Abu Hanifa and Zafar, disagreeing with the opinion of the majority, argue on the basis that hadith narrated by Ibn Umar and quoted by Bukhari and Muslim that the Prophet says, anything that has been irrigated by the sky, i.e. rain, is subject to a tenth, meaning a tenth of the produce. Abu Hanifa therefore recommends zakah on crops irrespective of the quantity. He relies on the last mentioned hadith, which is general in scope. Here again the controversy is due to contradiction between two hadith related to the same subject. Abu Hanifa preferred the last mentioned hadith because he, in case of contradiction, prefers the hadith which is more general, in nature. He further argues that the imposition of zakah is more advisable in the case of doubt. However, the fact is that there is no contradiction between and Khass limited in scope, because both of them are acted upon respective of their spheres, in their respective spheres. This is the opinion preferred by Shafi'i and others. This way we can remove an apparent contradiction between two sources as opposed to the method of Abu Hanifa in preferring to Khass. The above discussion proves that the apparent contradiction of some hadith and the different methods adopted by ulama to combine or prefer one hadith to another is a decisive factor in the juristic disagreements amongst the scholars. Various books have been written on this subject, such as Ikhtilāf al-Shafi'i ma'a Malik, the difference of Shafi'i with Malik. This is an appendix to Shafi'i's book Al-Um. Another book in this field is Ibn Qutayba's Kitab Mukhtalif al-Hadith and Tahawi's Mcgill al-Athar, which is the most detailed work ever written on the subject.